This is my next project. Saw this on Facebook Marketplace for $40. It was only 10 or 15 miles from my house, the little town that we go to the store. I looked up the name. It was a Waterbury Gibson, 1900 to 1920, somewhere in there. The only thing I did when I went to look at it was take this face off so I could see what was what. Face is in pretty good shape. It's pretty dirty, but other than that. It was hard to see on the picture that she put the glass, but it's pretty good shape in person. This is the movement. It's the one with the alarm clock, so you turn this dial and you put it under the hour hand, I think it is, and the alarm goes off when it's time. These wires are all bent up. And that's the one. And this is the gong for the time. There is a part of the virgin crutch assembly. The crutch is there, a little bit bent up, but there is no pendulum wire. The suspension spring is broken. That's under here. That's where it goes. I'm going to have to figure out how long it is. Clean it up good and get it all working again. I got to order some hands and the suspension spring and the pendulum leader wire. The pendulum is original. I found another one for sale on eBay for about $170, and this says fast and slow on it, and there's supposed to be a little arrow that when you turn the regulating nut at the bottom, it turns the hand fast and slow. It points you which way you're adjusting it. That's your alarm. This little hand was taped in there with a piece of tape. Not sure if this goes on here or not. I think it's not going on there. Maybe it goes, nope, doesn't go on there. It's definitely too big for that. So, this was one of the screws holding the face. And this was the other screw. I don't know if either one of them are the correct screw, but this is a case screw because there's only 2 screws holding the movement in. The whole thing is wobbling, so I don't know who would have worked on it and decided they couldn't fix it and halfway put it back together, but I'm going to enjoy working on this. So y'all stay tuned. You can work on it with me too. Alright, a few things you discover always when you're working on a clock is there's surprises. I did get the movement out, which wasn't difficult since there were only 2 screws holding it. It's had a preliminary scrub with some hot soapy water. Looks a lot better already. And then I put it in a Ziploc bag with my cleaning solution and sloshed it around. I don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, but it did a pretty good job. I haven't even taken it apart and taken a brush to anything yet. That's just cleaning it all in one unit. It brightened it up quite a bit so I could at least watch the gears turn and see where the warning pins are hitting what. Because when it's all black and nasty inside, like a kitchen clock will be from being in the kitchen for years, it's hard to tell what's what inside. So I've cleaned it up preliminarily, and I'm still going to play with it a little bit and get a little more familiar with its movement. What I discovered was both of these turn to the left on the sessions movement, which is different than any I've run into before. And I say sessions movement. This is a Waterbury clock case. I looked it up online, found it in the catalog. Definitely Waterbury. And the movement is definitely sessions. So at some point in the past, you know, 50 years ago, somebody replaced this movement. It's the right size, it does the right things, it has the alarm and everything else, so I'm going to use it. It wasn't obvious. It should be obvious if you go to look at a clock and everything's not put together just right. Because they only had the bottom 2 screws in it, and the plate was kind of sitting off like so, and it was hard to tell what was what. And my friend Mark Munnerlin did suggest taking a screwdriver, and I did take a screwdriver. And the lady let me take the front plate off, but it was so dirty you couldn't even tell that that was a different brand of clock. But it does fit. I will be able to use it. It does center up nicely, and it's going to work well, so I'm going to use it. So what I wanted to show you in here that's really cool is inside the case. All these little strips of wood that they used to make it curve around. And then there's one brace piece in the middle. Just like every huge cupola that's ever been built, including the one in our Capitol. I thought that was really cool. If you don't have a pendulum, suspension spring and wire, which apparently a lot of these don't, I've looked at a lot of them in antique stores, and a lot of times the pendulum is laying in the bottom of the case, because once this little piece of the suspension wire breaks, there's nothing to hold your pendulum leader wire on. So people just throw them away, apparently. I mean, they're not there. They're just gone. This is one that I took off of my Seth Thomas mantle clock. And I thought I could use it to get a rough idea of what size to even order, because I had no clue. So I've put this in here and just set it over the screw holes. This is my pendulum. So I want it to be swinging up from the bottom a bit, which with the pendulum leader wire from the mantle case, it would be way down here. So I'm saying a rough estimate of how long you want your suspension spring and leader wire is about the bottom legs here. About the bottom of that for these movements. So that's what I'm going to order, and I think it'll work pretty nicely. For those of you with the model that's like this, that has the alarm clock, which is the ones that have the big hole in the center with the little brass dial that you turn that's got numbers on it. When we put it all back together, we'll talk about how to set the alarm. But this is the alarm mechanism right here. It has its own little winder. So you wind that gear up and set the time, and your little alarm will go off. And we'll have to figure out how to turn it off, or does it just run until it winds down. But I've not had one like this. I think it's pretty cool. And here's the same piece after about 15 seconds swooshed around in my homemade cleaning solution. That's why I love these old movements. They clean up so well because the brass is solid. They're not plated. You can clean them and they come out gorgeous. That's without any scrubbing. I mean, I'll still take it apart and scrub it and get the lantern gear cleaned out because it's got a bunch of grease down in there, and you know, take the spring out and clean and grease it. So it still needs work, but a preliminary clean is done. So if y'all have ultrasonic cleaners that you plan on using, the homemade clean and swish really takes a lot of the gunk off first and keeps your expensive cleaning solutions clean. My homemade recipe I got from Mark Munnerlin, I'm pretty sure. It's 3 cups of ammonia, a cup of Murphy's oil soap, and a cup of Pine Sol or Mr. Clean or Simple Green, any of those cleaners. Pine Sol, Mr. Clean, or Simple Green. 1 cup of that, 1 cup of Murphy's oil soap, 3 cups of ammonia, and you've got a decently inexpensive cleaner that I've used on 2 clocks now, and I'm going to have to throw away. So for a few dollars, I've got a pretty good cleaner. First step to making this a little bit safer to work on is to put your rings on your springs. I've been able to loosen and greased these springs before in other movements, but this one, you can tell, needs to be taken apart and cleaned good. If you look, when you wind it, it doesn't wind and distribute evenly. Yeah. It's not level this way. This one wound nice and tight and it's flat. This one bound up here and is loose here and is lumpy. So I'm going to put the spring holders on those and undo my nuts. Take this top movement off. I got the C-clips on. I removed the front plate. When you lift it off, remove your nuts and lift this up slowly. Usually this escapement wheel is going to come off with your front plate, but it just slips out of there. Your count wheel stays on. And if this goes, I've got this upside down up top here. So governor fan, the notch, and the pinion goes toward the bottom, pinion gear. Levers, 2 up top, controlling your strike, 1 at the bottom, controlling your gong. Take a bunch of pictures with your phone. Make sure you get good images of where your springs go, because when you get back around to putting this together, it's hard to remember. So there's 2 springs on this, 1 from that time counting lever to this main post, and then 1 right inside on that one, down. You can find it on yours. And then this one wraps around this post. So Sessions and Seth Thomas and a bunch of them use the posts as where your springs wrap around. Others use the frame, the front and back plate. Anyway, I'm going to finish removing all of these and cleaning, and I'll make another video of how I let these down and scrub them. With the gears off, now you can put the spring back on and use this as your unwinding station. A lot of people I know don't have a spring winder, loader, rewinder. So there's videos out there. Scotty's Clock World I used to see how to take it apart without a spring winder, and there's a video on one inside the case, the spring case, how to take it out and put it back in without a spring winder, and then how to do one without the case with no winder. So we're going to use this. Set your post back in the hole. I want to show you on here. This is a safety mechanism on the plate itself to protect the gears in case something happened with the spring and it let loose. So the spring would come up to these posts and not get all up in your gears and bend them up, hopefully. So there's 1 for each side. That 1 for the center and 1 for each side. Alright, I got it back in the hole. Safety things. Protect your eyes. Protect your hands. Leather would be best. I'm trying these because I just happened to find them in the bottom of my grandfather's grandfather clock when I was winding it. I don't ever let it run out. It actually ran out. So I was pulling the weights up and checking it, and I found a pair of gloves down in the bottom of the grandfather clock. And I also found a little place to hang my winder, so I've had a fun morning. All right. We're going to wind it up enough to get this C-clamp off, which is what you need a glove for, because you have to hold it manually and keep it from unwinding. Try not to grind your gears on the posts. I didn't talk about this let-down tool that I'm using to wind and let the spring pressure down. I don't think I talked about that. It's a broom handle, the hole drilled in the end, and then a slot cut in the side. Mark Munnerlin's channel has a great video describing how to make that. That's what I used to make my tool. The ones to buy were $50 with 2 ends. You know, you had to buy different inserts for the different sizes. So with this one, whatever key goes to your clock, you use it in the broom handle and save $50. Okay. This one has a lot of dried grease in it. It doesn't wind very easily or evenly. The spring doesn't slide on itself. That's the whole point of us having to work on this. But you see my clamp's loose. I can take it off. I'm a 5'1" female, not a ton of strength. So if I can do this, you can do this. It's doable. Alright, once you got your clamp off, slowly let this out. You're just using your hand to keep the speed from getting away from you. You're going to let it unwind. It's going to hit the little stop post on the rear plate and start expanding outward. And you want it to expand out until there's not pressure on it anymore. Sometimes you're going to have to wiggle it if you've got one that's really dirty, like this one that's binding up on the dried grease chunks. Alright, we got most of the pressure out of that. It's not completely out. It gets a lot bigger than that. So be very careful lifting it off if all the pressure's not out. And then you can just let it open up in your hand. And you're ready to clean all this dried, nasty stuff off of there. I'm going to go clean it. There's different things to use to clean it. It's got some rust on it. I'm going to use a Scotch-Brite little green scrubby pad and some 409. Scrub it off. Then we'll re-grease it, put it back in. You do not want to pull this out. You do not want to pyramid your spring. When you set it down, you want it to be flat. If you set it down and it's still up like that, your spring is ruined and you need to order a new one. I'm going to gently try to get this gear off, and if I can't, I won't take it off, because the part of the spring that's the closest to the center is not very bad. So my battery on my camera's almost dead. I'll meet you back after I charge it up. I wanted to show you what I ended up having to do to get these springs clean. I've done one, gotten the deposits off. That's a darkened spot. It's not going to come off, but the rest, I got the brown dried on oil. I guess it was. Someone had put an oil on there instead of grease. So it was pretty bad. Not having much luck with the fast orange. Don't use the kind with pumice, they say. This had pumice, and I'm using this, and I'm still not able to scrape off this brown stuff. I've got some warm water. I finally just poured some pine sol in it to try to soften this up. And then this is my cleaning solution that I mixed up that I gave you the recipe for with the Murphy's oil soap and pine sol and ammonia. So I have a little brush. I've been getting a little bit of that and going in here. And that is about the only thing. It's going to take apparently something ammoniated to get the brown crusty parts off. So I'm going to keep working on this one. You can see a difference pretty quickly. Put it on there. I can feel it softening, like being gummy. And then when I try to scrub it off, at least it's coming off. So if you have a really tough case, these springs are tough, I say use what you need to use. And we'll put a good bit of grease on it at the end. For my 2 clean springs, don't forget to, if you don't take these off, clean them while you're in there. This little spring releases so that you can get up under the click good. Some people keep them separate because some movements spin opposite directions. With the sessions movement, they both wind to the left, so it doesn't matter which one is which. But I can tell them apart because someone made a little repair on the end of this one. I'm going to keep using it. It's worked good up till now, so probably whoever installed this movement into my Waterbury clock instead of a sessions clock. But I'm going to grease up one of these, set it aside, and I'll show you how to grease the second one. I've got one wound up and in a little baggie ready to go in the clock, greased nicely. I'm going to grease the second one. I used Q-tips. This is grease, hydraulic grease from my tractor grease gun. It ought to be able to handle the pressure of a spring. I've tried it with a Q-tip in the past. You can get a little bit on a Q-tip and rub it around inside. You only need to grease one side of these, like say, pick whatever side you want, the inside, and just follow it on around. This clock, I opted to use a Q-tip. I felt like I got a little better, more even application. And I was able to get higher up, putting a very thin layer on both sides this way. A little more. Just trying to get toward the center as much as I can. It's hard to get in there to clean it without making the spring be sprung and useless. So this Q-tip, and the fact that the back is still on it, I can use it to unwind it and give me a tad bit more room. Trying to get back in there. That's about as close as I'm going to get. So the last 4 rings or so are not going to have any. But it did kind of clean it coming out of there. So with the toothpick, you would just want to put the grease on one side. With this being such a thin layer with the Q-tip, I'm going to grease both sides. That's the inside. Now I'm going to do the outside. Q-tips about had it. I'm putting it all the way down here because one of the bands had some rust, so I'm just preventing, I've sanded it off nicely, just preventing it from rusting again. This part doesn't get wound, it doesn't really need any grease on it, but it'll keep it from rusting. And this is just sitting on this plastic to try to contain a little of the grease. And I think that's about got it all. Alright. Now we're going to put it on here. Don't clean all your parts and your base before you do this because you're just going to get grease on it again. We're going to slip the end on. We're going to get on that outside of all the tabs and get the bottom back on. Alright, we're back in the post. We have this on the post. We're inside of that post. So we're ready to wind once we get the grease off our hands. With the grease, you can see how the pressure is evenly distributed. That's what keeps your spring from breaking, because it can disperse the pressure evenly to all the different rings. When it's got those dried gunks on there, it can't. So it puts a lot of pressure in one spot and causes your spring to break. Press down, hold it onto the base plate, and get it small enough to get our C-clamp back on. I believe we're about small enough. Alright, then we're going to let it down a little bit till it's back in the clamp. If you hear that noise, you're grinding your teeth on the post. You want to try to get the clamp in the center of the spring. Alright, now we're ready to slip it off.
Hey, it's me, Dry Skin. I'm craving something we're missing.
Then I just took a toothpick and got the extra off. Wasn't much extra doing it this way. Put a pretty nice, thin, uniform layer in there, so I was happy with that. Alright, so I've got a little baggie to put it in. And we'll go on to cleaning the other parts. All the parts are cleaned. Do not forget to take care of the spring that goes with your alarm. I'm going to do the same thing. Grease all up in there, wind it back up, put it all back together.